It was deep in the night. Inside their small home, Osas and Nengi lay side by side in bed. Nengi was fast asleep, her breath steady, lost in dreams. But Osas was wide awake, his heart beating like a drum echoing in his chest. Tonight was the night. He had a plan to set in motion, one that could change everything. As he listened to the soft rhythm of her breathing, he knew it was time. Slowly, so slowly he barely made a sound, Osas shifted in bed. He knelt, his knees pressing into the mattress, careful not to wake his sleeping wife. His hands were steady, his eyes fixed on Nengi's peaceful form. Then, inch by inch, he began to roll up her wrapper. The fabric slid easily, revealing what he was searching for: her panties. His fingers moved like shadows as he reached for her underwear. Gently, he started to slip it down, his heart pounding louder with each passing second. But Nengi, deep in her dreams, remained unaware, her sleep undisturbed by the silent betrayal unfolding beside her. What did Osas intend to do with her panties? And what fate awaited Nengi, blissfully ignorant of her husband's dark plans? To understand how things came to this, we must go back to a time when Osas and Nengi were living simple lives in the village, before riches, before sacrifice, before everything changed. Once upon a time, in a quiet village called Karu, there was a man named Osas. Osas was poor, so poor he could barely afford to buy a loaf of bread. But Osas had a big problem: his wife Nengi. Nengi was as beautiful as the morning sun, with eyes that sparkled like fresh river water. But she was as proud as a peacock, and nothing pleased her more than showing off, like a parrot with bright feathers. Every time she stepped out of their little house, her head held high, she would tell tales that weren't true. Whenever there was a family feast or a village party, Nengi was the first to arrive. She walked in, her head held high like a queen, her laughter loud, her eyes bright with pride. And as soon as she found her place among the women, her mouth would start to weave stories. "Oh, my Osas," she would say, waving her hands like a bird's wings. "He's the best husband in the world. He bought me this dress last week, and oh, this necklace. He wouldn't let me work, even if I wanted to." The women listened with wide eyes, some amazed, some envious. But it was all lies, like clouds in a dry season, full of promises but with no rain. Osas was poor, his pockets as empty as a broken calabash, and Nengi knew it, but she wanted so badly to look grand, to be the one the other women talked about. Osas, poor as he was, could hardly keep food on the table. Yet Nengi never lifted a finger to help. She stayed at home, cooking and keeping the house, while Osas worked until his bones ached. She had no shame in telling lies, making it seem like her life was grand while Osas was there, suffering quietly, too kind to speak against her. And to keep up her show, Nengi did something even worse. She borrowed money, lots of it, from anyone who would give it to her. She borrowed from her family, from the neighbors, and even from strangers in the next village. She used the money to buy fine clothes, shiny jewelry, and fancy shoes, all to make her look rich. Nengi's pride was so big that she didn't care about the debts piling up, like a hill of trouble waiting to tumble down. Meanwhile, poor Osas, tired and worn, worked day and night, trying to keep his home afloat. Little did he know that his wife's pride was digging them into a deeper pit, one that would be hard to climb out of. And so, Nengi's lies grew and grew, like a fire with no end in sight, while Osas struggled, unaware of the flames his wife had started. As time went on, Osas's heart began to ache for something more. He wanted a child, a little one to fill their home with laughter. He imagined holding a baby in his arms, a son or daughter who would call him Papa. So, one quiet evening, he gathered his courage and spoke to Nengi. "Nengi," he said softly, his eyes warm with hope, "don't you think it's time we had a child? Someone to make this house feel fuller, to carry on our name. But Nengi's face twisted in annoyance. A child? With what money? She scoffed. We can barely feed ourselves. I won't bring a child into poverty. Osas's heart sank. Her words were as sharp as a thorn. He didn't want to force her, so he just nodded, feeling the weight of her refusal. But his sadness didn't reach her heart. She was too wrapped up in her pride and desire to live large, too busy thinking of clothes and parties to worry about having a family. Still, Osas loved her. Don't worry, my dear, he said gently. I'll take care of you, and if we have a child, I'll work twice as hard. But Nengi only sighed, rolling her eyes. Take care of me? Osas, you can barely take care of yourself. And so, Osas let the matter rest, his hope tucked away like a tiny seed hidden in the ground. He didn't know that Nengi's heart was set not on family, but on money, on jewelry, on the admiration of others. To her, those things mattered more than the thought of a little one's laughter filling their home. One bright afternoon, Nengi returned from a family gathering, her face clouded with anger, her steps heavy, like a storm about to burst. She slammed the door and paced around, muttering under her breath. Osas, who was resting from a long day in the fields, looked up, surprised. What's wrong, my dear? He asked gently. Nengi didn't answer at first, her eyes flashing with jealousy. Finally, she spat out. There's a new woman in town, Osas. She's from the next village, and everyone is talking about her. They say she's beautiful, rich, always wearing the finest clothes. Can you imagine? Me, the one everyone looks up to, now being shadowed by her. Osas sighed, hoping Nengi would brush it off, but she was seething. Osas, we need money, she demanded, her voice sharp. I can't let anyone take my place. You have to find a way to make more. I need finer things, better clothes, more jewelry. I can't be the laughingstock of the village. Osas rubbed his forehead, feeling the weight of her demands. Nengi, he said softly, I'm doing all I can. You know how hard I work. But Nengi waved his words away like dust. Not enough. Do something, Osas. You're the man of this house. You can't let me lose my honor. Osas looked down, torn. His heart was heavy, and he wondered how he could give Nengi the riches she craved when they barely had enough to eat. But the look in her eyes was fierce, and her words echoed in his mind. She was determined, and he felt he had no choice but to listen. And so, from that day, the thought of wealth began to whisper in Osas's mind, a seed planted by Nengi's endless pride, one that would soon take root in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The days passed, and Nengi's demands grew louder, like drums beating in Osas's ears. She wouldn't let him rest. She wanted wealth, and she wanted it quickly. Finally, worn down by her words, Osas agreed to seek out the village oracle, a mysterious man who lived at the edge of the forest. People said he could see hidden things, that he held powers beyond ordinary men. With Nengi by his side, Osas arrived at the oracle's hut. The air was thick with the smell of herbs and smoke. The oracle, an old man with eyes like shadows, greeted them with a nod, his voice deep and slow. You come for wealth, he said, looking straight into Osas's eyes. But wealth does not come freely. There is always a price. Osas shivered, feeling a chill run through his bones. But before he could speak, Nengi stepped forward. We're ready to do what it takes, she said firmly. Tell us what we must do. The oracle nodded, closing his eyes as if listening to a voice only he could hear. After a long silence, he spoke. The blood of a ram will open the path to riches. Sacrifice it, and wealth will come your way. Osas's heart pounded. He had never thought of taking an animal's life for such a purpose. But Nengi nudged him hard, her eyes fierce with determination. It's just a ram, Osas, she whispered urgently. Think of our future. Think of our children. Though his heart was heavy, Osas agreed. they found a ram, and together they performed the ritual as the oracle had instructed. Nengi's hands were steady, her gaze unflinching, while Osas's hands shook, his spirit uneasy. But it was done. The blood spilled, the sacrifice made. In the days that followed, strange things began to happen. Money seemed to appear from nowhere. Hidden coins, unexpected gifts, new customers for Osas's small trade. Their fortunes shifted, slowly at first, but soon it was like a river flowing, filling their home with wealth. Nengi's eyes gleamed with delight, her heart full of pride as she watched their riches grow. And so, the first taste of wealth came, brought by the blood of a ram, as Nengi's thirst for more only deepened, like a well with no bottom. Osas and Nengi's wealth grew, and soon whispers of a child to come filled their home. As Nengi became pregnant, Nengi was finally expecting, and Osas's heart swelled with joy. He pictured a little one with Nengi's bright eyes, someone to carry on his name. They were rich now, with new clothes, jewelry, and fine food on their table. Life seemed perfect. But one dark night, as they were about to rest, a knock came at the door. Osas opened it, and there stood the oracle, his face hidden in the shadows, his eyes like deep pools of night. "It is time," he murmured, his voice cold. "The blood of the ram is spent. To keep your wealth, another sacrifice is needed." Osas's heart stopped. "Another ram?" he asked, though dread twisted in his stomach. The oracle shook his head slowly. "Not a ram. This time, it must be human blood. If not, you will go mad or die within 3 days." Osa stumbled back, his eyes wide with fear. Human blood? The thought struck him like a sharp knife. But before he could protest, Nengi stepped forward, her face calm, but her eyes hard as stone. "We could use the child," she said, her voice cold as iron. "No one would know. I could say, 'I lost it, just a miscarriage.'" Osas's heart shattered. "Our child? Nengi, this is madness." But Nengi's pride wouldn't bend. "What's the use of a child if we're poor and struggling?" she argued. "We wanted riches, Osas. Think of everything we have now. You want to throw it all away?" Osas' head spun, torn between the life of his unborn child and the curse of madness and death that loomed over them. He could see no way out. Trembling, he gave in, his heart as heavy as a stone sinking in deep water. And so, they did it. They sacrificed the unborn child, and the riches continued to flow like a river that knew no end. But as the wealth grew, a shadow also settled in Osas's heart, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they had crossed a line that no wealth could ever wash away. The sacrifice of their unborn child brought more wealth than Osas and Nengi could have ever imagined. Their house overflowed with fine clothes, glittering jewelry, and treasures from far-off lands. It was as if gold rained down on them day and night. But while riches piled high around him, Osas's heart felt emptier than ever, like a well that had run dry. Nengi, however, was happier than a bird in flight. She adorned herself in the finest silks, draped in gold and jewels that sparkled like the stars. Every chance she got, she attended grand gatherings and village parties, her head high, her voice loud, as she boasted about their newfound wealth. "My husband is the richest man in the village," she would say, showing off her new bangles. "He won't let me work. He says it's beneath me." The women around her listened in awe, envy shining in their eyes, unaware of the dark secrets buried in Nengi's home. But Osas, poor Osas, watched all this with a heart heavy as stone. The memory of their lost child clung to him, a shadow that darkened his every thought. While Nengi danced and laughed, flaunting her riches, Osas sat in silence, haunted by what they had given up for this wealth. The joy and laughter around him felt hollow, like an empty drum echoing in the night. Nengi, however, seemed untouched by sorrow. To her, their riches were all that mattered. She wanted more, always more, while Osa silently carried the burden of what they had done, a secret he could never erase. And so, Nengi lived her high life, while Osas's heart grew heavier with every glittering coin that crossed their path. The riches continued to flow, but with it came the oracle once more, his presence like a chill that seeped into every corner of Osas's mind. He arrived silently, his gaze heavy with purpose. "The time has come again," the oracle said in a voice as sharp as the wind. "Another sacrifice is needed, and this time it must come from you, Osas." Osas's heart trembled. He had already given so much, his unborn child, his peace. Now the oracle asked for a piece of him. Nengi stood nearby, her arms folded, her gaze unbothered. She was draped in jewels, her mind lightly dancing with thoughts of her next grand feast. "What must I give?" Osas asked, his voice barely a whisper. "The left eye," the oracle replied. "It will seal your wealth, but without it, the riches will turn to dust." Osas closed his eyes, his heart filled with dread. He had no choice, and so he gave up his left eye. Pain struck him, sharp and searing, leaving him with darkness on one side. After the ritual, he stumbled back to his house, his face covered in a cloth, hiding what was now gone. When the villagers saw him, they were filled with questions. "Osas, what happened to you?" they asked, concern mixed with curiosity. "Oh," Osas lied, his voice steady. "I had an accident while working, nothing more." Some villagers believed him, their faces sympathetic, but others exchanged whispers, their eyes suspicious. "Maybe it was for a ritual," some muttered. "Look how rich he's become." But Nengi paid no mind to the whispers or Osas's suffering. While he hid in their house, nursing his pain, she continued to attend parties, her pride soaring like a kite in the sky, her hunger for wealth never satisfied. And so, Osas sat in darkness, burdened by his sacrifice, while Nengi continued her life of glitter and gold, blind to his growing despair. Barely had Osas adjusted to the loss of his eye when the oracle returned, as silent and demanding as ever. "Osas, the sacrifice must continue," he said, his voice cold as the night. "This time, another part of you is needed." Osas's heart grew heavy. The riches were piling up, but he was losing himself piece by piece. He turned to Nengi, hoping that perhaps, just this once, she would share the burden with him. "Nengi," he pleaded, his voice tired and low, "can't you give something too? I've given my eye, I've given so much. Isn't it time you offered something?" But Nengi only laughed, her eyes flashing with pride and irritation. "Osas, I'm the woman and you're the man. Your job is to protect me, to provide. Don't expect me to give up anything. I'm far too busy enjoying life to worry about these sacrifices." Her words struck him like stones, leaving his heart bruised and his spirit crushed. Yet he had no choice. So he returned to the oracle and offered up his toes. The pain was sharp and deep, twisting through his body, leaving him stumbling and weak. Now each step was a struggle, his balance unsteady, his walk slow and painful. Back in the village, people noticed Osas's limp, his missing toes, and they whispered even more. "Another sacrifice," they muttered. "Look how the man has changed. He gives and gives. But where does it end?" But Nengi was blind to his suffering. She continued to visit parties, gatherings, and family feasts, her laughter echoing like bells while Osas stumbled, trying to hide his pain. She brushed off his wounds as if they were nothing. Her only concern, the riches that poured into their home. When Osas tried to speak of starting a family again, she scoffed. "Not now, Osas. I have no time to be burdened with children. I'm too busy living the life I've dreamed of." And so, Osas limped through his days, bearing the weight of sacrifice on his own shoulders, while Nengi enjoyed the life he had paid for with his very flesh. One cold night, as Osas lay in bed, exhausted and broken, he heard a faint knock at the door. His heart sank. He knew what it meant. The oracle had returned, once again demanding a sacrifice. This time, Osas's soul felt as empty as a dry riverbed. He was weak, worn down from giving parts of himself, each piece leaving him a little less whole. With a heavy sigh, Osas turned to Nengi, his voice trembling as he spoke. Nengi, I've given so much. My eye, my toes. Each sacrifice is tearing me apart. Can't you offer something this time? Even a small piece of yourself? Nengi merely tossed her head back and laughed, her voice cold and careless. Me? Give something? Osas, you're the man of the house. It's your duty to provide for me. Sacrifice more if you must. Desperation flickered in Osas's eyes. But Nengi, he pleaded, I can barely walk. I can barely see. How much more can I give? Nengi looked at him, a smirk tugging at her lips, her eyes gleaming with the sharpness of a blade. Well, if you're so concerned, maybe you should give the other eye too, You'll still be alive, even if you can't see. Osas stared at her, his heart twisted with disbelief. His own wife, the one he had sacrificed so much for, was willing to see him suffer even more, with no care, no pity. The betrayal in her words burned deeper than any wound. Desperate and feeling he had nothing left to give, Osas returned to the oracle, pleading for guidance. The oracle, watching him with steady eyes, finally spoke. If there's something of hers you can bring, something close to her, like a piece of clothing, we can work with it. Even a single garment can carry her part in the sacrifice. Osas felt the weight of the oracle's words pressing on him like a mountain. He had no choice but to find something of hers, anything that could fulfill the oracle's demand. He thought long and hard, his heart heavy with sorrow, yet resolved. And so, with his spirit drained, Osas's thoughts turned to the only thing Nengi left behind while she went to her endless parties. A piece of her clothing, perhaps even her most personal item, would be the sacrifice he would give in her place. The decision sat cold in his heart as he prepared to face the oracle once more, his mind filled with Nengi's laughter that echoed like a cruel melody in the darkness. One evening, while Nengi was out, dressed in her finest clothes and glittering jewels, laughing and dancing at yet another village gathering, Osas sat at home, his heart as heavy as stone. The memory of her cold words, "Maybe you should sacrifice the second one," echoed in his mind like a haunting drumbeat. Left with no other choice, he moved quietly through the house, searching for something of hers that could fulfill the oracle's demand. And then, in her room, he found it, a simple piece of cloth, her underwear folded among her things. With trembling hands, he took it, feeling both strange and relieved, for it was the only thing he could offer. He brought it to the oracle, laying it down as his sacrifice. The oracle took the offering without a word, his eyes dark and knowing. Osas left, feeling a strange weight lifted off him, though a sense of dread lingered like a shadow. He returned home, his heart hoping for some peace, but uncertain of what might come. Once the sacrifice was made, Nengi never bothered to ask Osas what was given this time to keep their wealth flowing. Her mind was lost in the new luxuries filling her life. More money, jewels that sparkled brighter than stars, and clothes finer than silk. The thought of what sacrifice had been required to keep it all never crossed her mind. In her eyes, Osas's duty was to keep the riches coming, and the moment she saw the money, nothing else mattered. She celebrated, she boasted, she dressed herself in the finest, blissfully ignorant that her own garment had sealed the sacrifice. For Nengi, riches were the only thing worth thinking about. Days passed, and then one bright afternoon, the peace shattered. Nengi was at the market, laughing, surrounded by people, when suddenly her legs gave way beneath her. She stumbled and fell, unable to stand, her once proud form crumbling to the ground. People rushed to help, but Nengi's legs were weak, as if all strength had drained from her body. As the days passed, her condition worsened. Nengi lay in bed, her skin growing pale, her body thin and frail. the life fading from her with each passing moment. The villagers whispered, watching as the proud, beautiful Nengi was reduced to a shadow of herself, a flower withering in the sun. Osas looked on, a strange sadness mixed with relief in his heart, as he realized the weight of every sacrifice was now finding its place. Nengi's condition grew worse by the day. Her body frail as a dried leaf, her spirit weighed down by something heavy and dark. Her mother, alarmed by her daughter's decline, came and took Nengi to a powerful herbalist woman known for her wisdom and strange potions. The herbalist looked at Nengi with eyes that seemed to see straight into her soul. Without a word, she handed her a thick black potion, its scent strong and bitter. "Drink this," she said, her voice low and steady, "and speak the truth. Every secret you hold in your heart, every hidden thing, let it out, or your suffering will only grow." As the potion slid down her throat, hot and rough, Nengi's heart began to pound, and words tumbled from her lips like water spilling over a broken pot. She confessed it all, her voice weak and trembling. "Mother, I envy my sister's wealth. She married rich, and I couldn't stand to be looked at as poor. I borrowed from everyone I could find just to keep up. When Osas and I had nothing left, we went to the oracle. We sacrificed our unborn child. I even watched as Osas lost his eye, then his toes, all for the riches I wanted." Her mother's face was stricken with shock, tears filling her eyes. But Nengi's confession continued, her voice a shadow of regret. "I even wished Osas would die," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath, "so I could take everything and run away with the money, without sickness or pain to slow me down." The herbalist's eyes narrowed, understanding the depths of Nengi's greed. She looked at her and spoke words that chilled the air. "Your husband sacrificed your panties for the last ritual. That is why your body weakens day by day. You wished suffering on him, but now that suffering has become your own." Her mother's heart broke as she realized the depth of her daughter's betrayal. She had pushed Osas beyond what any heart should endure, only to face the bitter consequences herself. The herbalist nodded solemnly. "Take her home. She will live with the weight of her own choices, as the spirits demand." After leaving the herbalist, Nengi returned home with her mother. Her body was weak, her steps slow, but inside her, a fire burned with rage. She clenched her fists, her mind seething with thoughts of Osas. How could he betray her like this, using her belongings in the ritual without her permission? In her heart, she vowed he would pay for what he had done. But as they stepped into the house, an eerie silence met them. The rooms were empty. Their treasures vanished like mist in the morning sun. Every coin, every piece of gold, every jewel they'd acquired through the ritual was gone. "Osas," Nengi called out, her voice cracking with anger and desperation. But only the walls answered her, silent and cold. She stumbled from room to room, her heart racing as the reality sank in. Osas had fled. He had taken everything they'd gained, the money, the jewelry, the gold, every treasure they'd sacrificed so much for, and left the town, leaving her alone, with nothing but the hollow ache of her own pride and a heart full of bitterness. Nengi's mother watched in silence, her own heart heavy as she saw her daughter's dreams crumble to dust. Nengi's rage turned to despair, and she sank to the ground, the weight of her choices pressing down on her like a mountain. And that was the end of the tale of greed, pride, and the terrible cost of empty dreams. The villagers spoke of Nengi and Osas for years to come. A lesson on the danger of pride and the bitter price of wealth gained at any cost. I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, please like the video, comment what you learned from the tale, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more enchanting tales just like this one. Thank you.